Hi there, it's Kathleen here, and welcome to The Gathering, bringing God into everyday life. Let me encourage you to not just listen, but partner with God and practice what He speaks to you. You can access more information about me, my newspaper articles, upcoming events, contact me, or purchase my book, Thriving Through Seasons of Grief, on my website at www.kathleenmaxwell-rambie.com. This podcast is now in 28 countries, and people have donated so that you can listen free. Will you consider paying it forward for someone else by giving a one-time or monthly gift? Simply click the button that says Become a Patron or Patronage at the top of the podcast. And don't forget to click the like or follow, and you'll be the first to know when new episodes are released. Enjoy the podcast. So welcome everyone. It's just my delight to be able to speak in a glass house. I've never done that before, and so I have loved every minute of Penang and also in a rainforest. So this is a first for me, but we're going to jump in to talk about how do we get through grief and disappointments and loss. And so I come speaking to you today as an ordinary Texas girl, a wife, a mother of 3 and actually 5 now. I have 2 bonus children. I come to you as a grandmother of 11 and as somebody who's been a widow at an early age, a caregiver, a writer, and a speaker. But most of all, I love people, and I love helping them become all that God has for them and helping people overcome difficulty. And as I said, I do a lot of work in the Uvalde, Texas area since that particular community and many families have gone through a tragic event. But what people don't realize is it's not just the children and the teachers. And I had lunch 10 days before one of the teachers with her before one of them died. We never know when it's going to be our last encounter with somebody. But all that to say, I've been working in that area for the last 3 years. And I also am a writer. I write for several newspapers. And so if you sign the paper over there, I periodically post, maybe twice a month or so, my latest podcast, the latest article that's come out in the newspaper. And if that's something you would like to continue to hear about, then I know I saw some other information, but they're short. I won't send you a lot of stuff. You can sign the sheet or go to my website and sign up. In your packet today are some places where you can take notes. Grief is a journey, and many times we need some tools or things to reflect on. And many people come to my seminars that I do every other month or so in Uvalde, as well as at different organizations. Many people come several times because they're at different places in their stage of grief, or I never can do the same seminar twice at one time. So anyway, you can type in Thriving Through Seasons of Grief, Understanding Grief and Sorrow, but this one will be recorded and uploaded. All right, I've already talked about the book being on Amazon, and so we're going to jump in. You know, nobody signs up for grief, but grief and sudden change are just a part of life here on earth, and nobody's exempt from it. Grief just shows up, and many times when it shows up, it knocks on the door. And you go to the door and it barges in your house, and it tends to take over your life and can. And that's hard. And what I have found is a lot of people don't talk about it. Or you get past the first few months and people think you should be over that tragic thing. You should be healed. If you had only trusted God, this wouldn't have. People can say crazy things, and we'll talk about that. But I want to tell you, and this might be something you want to write down, that grief has been one of my best teachers. And what I mean by that is my constant prayer was, I don't want to waste this pain. God, it is awful. I don't want to waste it. So work things in me that I need and work things out of me. in this. And when we embrace it, I believe, and we work through our pain, we can come out as better people. I had someone come up to me one time, and it was somebody that I hadn't seen. We had been real close, but I hadn't seen them in a while. I really had a good one-on-one conversation and happened to run into him. And the woman stopped and she looked at me. It was about 2.5 years after losing my late husband. And she said, "You're different." And I stepped back and I said, "I am. What do you mean by that?" And she said, "You're softer." And she said, "I just see a lot of compassion in you." And there's something about when you go through a suffering that it can develop a compassion and an understanding in your heart for either to understand yourself better or to understand others that you might come in contact with. But I'm here to tell you that what you do with your grief is going to make a big difference in your life, good or bad. It will make a difference. And I want to encourage you, grief is a very living thing. So when it shows up, and again, you can't schedule it, you can't work it away, you can't drink it away, you can't take enough drugs to make it go away. When your grief shows up and there's that pain in your heart or the tears come to your eyes, let it show up. Let it show up. Be kind to yourself because it's a living thing and it can come like a wave. And we never quite know when that wave will come and when it might bowl us over and all of a sudden we're a puddle of tears. I didn't cry a whole lot prior to my grief. Different griefs I've gone through. But now I don't hold the tears back. And many times other people might be more uncomfortable. You know, after losing my late husband, I had people, "Well, how are you?" And depending on the days, I got to where I would say, "Today's a good day. Thanks for asking. Today's been just a little bit of a challenge." And I got comfortable with just being honest. But if those tears came, I just let them come. I had a young woman one day, she said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. I'm so sorry." And I just looked at her and I said, "I've had a great loss and it's worth crying over. You didn't do anything. You didn't do anything." I said, "I just had a great loss." And so it set her at ease. It set her at ease. Like I said, I didn't cry a lot as a child. I grew up in a home, I had great mom and dad, taught me a lot of things. We were in church from an early age. I got saved or invited Jesus into my heart when I was 10. But my dad, being a Texas man, and it is quite a Texas thing, I will tell you, especially from the generation he was from, if I ever got my feelings hurt or came home or was crying, he would look at me and he would say, "Kathleen, suck it up, be tough, you're a Jones." So I quickly learned that it wasn't okay to share my emotions or my hurt or cry. And, it wasn't anything as a child that I really talked about much. But I hit a season in my 30s when my late husband and I went through a really tough time in our marriage. And all of a sudden, all of those tears I'd been bottling up for 30 whatever years began to come out. And I began to learn about grief. That was one of the first times, because I had a dear friend that said, "Kathleen, you're grieving the marriage you thought you had. But that doesn't mean that God can't work it out for you." And she was a woman who had been through infertility herself and how she had to grieve the loss of not having children. And so there are many kinds of grief. And what I've discovered is mourning can either take you to an encounter with God, or it can take you into a lie of unbelief. It can take you either into an encounter with God or into a lie of unbelief. Unbelief like, God must not love me, I'm just a horrible person, this has happened to me. All of those things. Any of us can believe a lie. One of my favorite prayers is, Lord, reveal truth anywhere that I have believed a lie. That somebody's told me, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're fat, you'll never amount to anything. Or a lie I've told myself. Okay? I should have done this better. Oh, well, I should have, but that doesn't mean I'm a failure. Just made a mistake. One of my favorite prayers is, God, reveal truth any place I've believed a lie about myself, about others, because I believe in the Bible, and I'm not here to preach to anybody. I'm really not. I have I do my presentations, I'm just sharing my story. But it does say in the Bible that God is a God of truth. So we're going to talk about different kinds of losses and shattered dreams. And part of my personality, as I said, is not to waste time. If I was going to go through it, I wanted to come out different. But life on earth is not fair. How many of you can say life isn't fair? I've had some hard knocks. I've gone through some crazy things. Nobody knows about the abuse I went through. I've had many a woman sit there, and man now in my work in Uvalde, share about things that they've never told anyone. Life is not fair. Bad things can happen to good people. It's just life here on earth, and we live in a fallen world. And there's no right or wrong way to grieve. I'm not going to say you ought to be this far down the road in this month or that month. No. But the important thing is to keep moving through it. Keep moving through it. And so my goal today is that you'll walk away with some tools in your tool belt to not only help you, but to help others rebuild their lives. And that you will truly learn how to thrive in your grief. And to unravel any lies that maybe you've believed about the process. The word thrive means to grow and develop vigorously. And you might want to write that down unless you just have that embedded in your mind. Thrive means to grow and develop vigorously. And that's my prayer for you. I married at 19. I was very young. My husband was 22. We started our life. We had all these dreams. We had 3 children. We couldn't wait till we were empty nesters, and we could travel, and we could do just some of the fun things that we had in our hearts. But my late husband was diagnosed with a very rare cancer that only 2 in a million get. Only 2 in a million. It was called Merkel cell carcinoma. And I hadn't been home from Indonesia 6 weeks when he got that diagnosis. And so we were all of a sudden on a fast track for a cure and for his life. And we had people from all over. We had more prayers than anybody could ask for. But one day he was in MD Anderson, and I needed to take a break. And I looked at him and I said, honey, I need to go outside. I need to just get a breath of fresh air. And he said, take your time, go. And as I'm walking around that block in downtown Houston, I said, God, I see Joe in a win-win situation. Either you heal him and we have a great testimony and we can go tell others about you, or you'll take him home. And I know he'll be in heaven with you because I'm knew his faith and knew he loved Jesus and God was using us to minister to others. I said, but God, I don't see myself in a win-win situation. And I know you're good, and I know you love me as much as you love Joe, but I don't see myself in a win-win situation. And I felt God speak in that moment, and he said, Kathleen, I will either heal Joe or I'll heal your broken heart. I will be with you. And in that moment, I knew I would be okay either way. I did not know how. I just thought, okay, he's going to be healed. Little did I know that wasn't necessarily going to be our story. But Psalm 34 is a passage that became very dear to me. And I'm here today to tell you that I don't know much, but I do know that God heals broken hearts and shattered dreams, because it's what I've discovered in the darkest days of my life. In Psalm 34:18, and I'm going to read this from the Passion Translation, it says, the Lord is close to all whose hearts are crushed by pain, and he's always ready to restore the repentant one. Even when bad things happen to the good and godly ones, the Lord will save them and not let them be defeated by what they face. And that's what I hung on to in those dark days. I love it in other translations too, but I love it in that because it does reiterate just what I said, in that bad things do happen to good people. The big question is, who are you going to become when you've lost your loved one or when your dream has been shattered? And you get to choose. You know, when tragedy strikes, many times we feel powerless. But when we take responsibility for our grief, we take our power back. That's worth writing down. When you take responsibility for your grief, you take your power back. Joe got cancer. I didn't cause it. And at first I felt like a victim, until God showed me I had a God-given right to overcome in my heartache and disappointment. And that's another topic that I'll be discussing later, and it's on my podcast. But you have choices on how you're going to respond when tragedy strikes. And I'm here to tell you that God did not cause your tragedy, but he was ever present with an eternal purpose. And, you know, as I was looking for answers in my devastation, and there weren't many people. I was widowed at 49. I didn't know anyone else as young as I was that had come through grief or was in my place. I knew a lot of older people because in the nonprofit I worked for, I had a lot of older volunteers, retired people, like me now, except I've come back out. But many in the Bible, as I dove in and was feeling sorry for myself and trying to figure out how to go on in my life, all alone, as a widow, as a single mom, as someone, you know, young, and I had to work. My youngest was in college. I had a lot of things I had to figure out. But as I was feeling sorry for myself, I began to go to the scriptures to just find answers for me. And I discovered many in the Bible had their plans hijacked. And I use that word because that's really what I felt like had happened to my life. I was hijacked. I was held captive. I was like on a plane and somebody hijacked it. And I thought I was going this direction. And, you know, and I was all of a sudden going another direction that I never signed up for. But in the scripture, I found Job had his plans hijacked. He lost his entire family. Shortly after losing Joe, I lost my mom and my dad. So the three most important people in my life in a short amount of time. So my world was I was figuring a lot of things out. But Job lost his entire family. David, wrote the book of Psalms, or inspired it. David talks about how in his grief, his bones ached and his bones were dry. And he lost a son. Mary, the mother of Jesus, watched her son be crucified. I've got 2 6'4" redheaded sons. I can't imagine watching either one of them be crucified. I just can't. But those people pressed into God and they overcame in the midst of their suffering. And so I was like, I don't know anything, but that's what I want to do. So what is grief? Let's see if I can do this. What is grief? Well, I'm going to give you a definition. Grief is the process of letting go, of saying goodbye to a person or season in our lives and moving on, moving forward. I'm not going to tell you you'll get over your loss, but I do want to give you hope that you will get through it. There's a passage, let me read that again. Grief is the process of letting go, saying goodbye to a person or season in our lives and moving on and moving forward to what I believe God has for us. And in Psalm 23, verse 4, I was reading in my Bible, because again, that's just where I turned in my devastation. It says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. And one day, I'd heard that 1,000,000 times, and it was used frequently at memorials or funerals. But one day when I read that, I saw that word through. Though I walk through. And my eyes got big, and I began to circle it in my Bible, and I was like, oh my word, grief is not my destination. I'm going to go through it. So my constant prayer was, God, keep me moving through it. Don't let me get stuck. I don't want to get stuck. What do I need to let go of today? What do I need to let go of this week? What do I need to let go of this month? Letting go of where we are can help us go to where we're going. But when you don't deal with your grief, or your heartache, or your depression, those things in your life, it will cause unhealthy behaviors. And many people can have emotional outbursts, depression sink in, anxiety, overeating, drug addiction, many things. People can try to medicate or feed that pain or drink it away. But those aren't healthy for us. And those are proven facts from the medical field, not me. But when we work through it, and again, say, God, keep me moving through it, God can work beauty out of those ashes. So partner with it. That's worth writing down. Partner. Choose to partner, I would encourage you, with the grief. Don't run from it. Run to it and through it when it shows up. So what are some of the different types of grief? This is a picture of my parents. And so what are the different kinds of grief? Well, someone dies, a parent, a spouse, grandparent, a friend, and sometimes it can be anticipated, but sometimes it can be a sudden death. It can be a sudden death. With my mom and my late husband, we had some indication that something might not work out right. My mom was diagnosed, my mother, who was my cheerleader, my prayer warrior, who taught me so much, right when I stepped into social work and ministry, Mom got sick with a very rare autoimmune disease. And it took the doctors 2 years to figure out what kind. And what we discovered is that disease had settled in her brain and had shut down different parts of her body. We'd been trying to fix the different parts of her body, and that wasn't it. The disease had settled in her brain. It wasn't a mental illness. It was an autoimmune disease, and it began to shrink the blood vessels of her brain and destroy some of them. And so when Mom got sick, and Mom actually battled for 8.5 years or so, and I watched my mom slowly slip away, which that was excruciating. Watching people I love suffer has been the hardest thing I've ever done. And towards the end of Mom's life, that was when Joe, my late husband, got sick. And I watched him go from being a big, strong, 220-pound man to, we all know what cancer can do in destroying a body. So it's very hard, very hard. So I dealt with anticipatory grief with Mom, and I say my mom taught me a lot that really prepared me. As hard as it was, I learned an awful lot about that. But anticipatory grief is where you grieve in installments. And it doesn't mean when the actual event happens that you don't grieve, but you have some warning. That's your heart can be grieving in installments. And I can tell you with my mother, because I had a long time with her, and I thought I wasn't going to live through that. But a dear friend and counselor, one day she came into my office. She said, "Kathleen, how are you doing? How's your mom?" And I said, "I'm not doing very well." I said, I can't imagine what my heart's going to be going through once she's gone. And she said, "Kathleen," she said, "you're grieving in installments. And not that it's not going to hurt when you lose your mom, but you know that could be happening." So that prepared me in some ways for, my late husband. There can also be, you move to another place. People don't think about how that is a grief many times, even though you choose. For many people, they have left their family behind to move to a different location. They're having to embrace a new culture. They're having to make new friends. My oldest son was in the military. He's just retired. And but he and his wife were at different places, from Annapolis to San Diego to Hawaii to, he was on a ship and did things that mothers really don't want to know about, And I asked him one day, I said, what can you tell me about your job? He said, "Well, Mom," he was in military intelligence. He said, "they burn my trash. They don't take it out." I said, "That's all I need to know. Thank you. Thank you. I love you. I'll pray for you." But my son and daughter-in-law, I would watch them too as they'd move from place to place. Many people don't realize. But it was the ending of a time period with friends they had embraced, done life with, and all those things. Another kind of grief is kids leaving home. I've seen a lot of people, once their children leave home, there are people that grieve because they don't have children. I have a dear friend that just said, a grief I'm dealing with, she had been through infertility, she said, is I don't have grandchildren, and all my friends do. And I feel left out because I don't I didn't get any grandchildren, so that was her grief recently. A major change in her life. I worked for a number of years at the Christian Women's Job Corps of Kirk County, and when I left, and I was passionate about what I did. I pulled my heart, my soul into it. Made a lot of friends. Knew I was there for a season. But when I quit that job, or retired from that job, because my parents were really sick and I needed to get too much in order for them, I went through a grief because I missed it. I missed the routine. Retirement is a major change in life. Uvalde, the community that I'm currently working in and living in, it forever went through a change. It was known as a good old boy town. My husband describes it as your handshake was as good as your word, or as good as a signed contract. And that's what it was known for. It now has a different name in a sense, or it's known for a different way of life. And there's still a lot of controversy, and it's still a very broken community, even 3 years later. But we are seeing more people come out for help now. Many people ran from it, have tried to blame, and they've stayed stuck. There's other people that are realizing, this isn't going away, I need help. So let me encourage you, get help. Even the death of a dream. The death of a dream is another type of grief, if you're taking notes. Like I said, my late husband and I had dreams. We were going to travel. We were going to, we'd have more money. The kids were going to be grown one day. Just those things you talk about on the hard days of parenting, especially. And one of our dreams was to go to Italy. And my daughter said to me not too long ago, because 2 years ago, my husband now and I went to Italy with a group of friends, and we had a blast. And my daughter said, Mom, I heard for years you and Dad talk about going to Italy. And she said, I think it's neat that you got to realize that dream. Your dream just looks different. I went with someone else. But many times we can have a death of a dream. We think our child is going to turn out, one way or make this choice or whatever, and they don't. Losing a pet is another type of grief. And you may say, well, it's an animal. But for many people, their pet becomes part of the family. There's the ranching dogs and the dogs that are used to work. But then there's the dogs that become your constant friends, and companion or support dog in a sense. The loss of a job. Even things, I have two grandsons that are special needs. We have one that is a type 1 diabetic, and he was diagnosed at 2. He's about to turn 12 now. And then we have a grandson that has Down syndrome. He's our little boy that is full of life. But I watched my children, and for us, we thought one thing. But even though, like my daughter-in-law put it, she said, I had to grieve the loss of the child I thought I was going to have. Now, we wouldn't trade Grant for anything. He's precious, he's full of life, he's adorable. But because of his special need, life looks different. Maybe your financial security is gone, or you've sold your business. Another kind of grief that I've sat with many people and helped them go through, I've had woman after woman walk into my office and say, I've never told anybody this. Okay? But I was raped. I was molested. And that story goes on. And I've never told anybody because of the guilt, because of the shame, because I couldn't talk to anyone. My mother told me not to talk about it. That's the loss. Something was stolen from those women. Something was stolen from them. And even those things need to be processed and taken to the Lord. Or your marriage falls apart. You dreamed of being married, you had children, you were going to live life, and all of a sudden there's a divorce. So those are just some of the different kinds and types of grief. So what are the stages of grief? Stages of grief. Well, I'm going to keep it simple. I know there's 7 stages, there's 10 stages, there's all these stages. I'm going to keep it simple and we're going to talk about 3. There's the denial, the shock. The events happened, the death has happened, the relationship is over. That's another kind of grief. You're really close with a friend, all of a sudden there's a misunderstanding or a death, and you lose that person. They've been a part of your everyday life. They knew your secrets. You live life together. There's the denial. We know it happened or it will happen, but we just don't have the time at that moment to grieve it. Many times it's God's provision, I feel, because we're just not ready to deal with it. My son was a freshman in college when his dad was diagnosed, and he was a sophomore, just started his sophomore year when his dad died. And as a mom, I was very concerned because I thought this could go any way. He's lost his dad. He was the child that was home 6 years and was he was our last one, so he got our attention for 6 years, just him. He and my late husband were very close and all. And as a mom, I just was like, Lord, this could go either way. He could get into drugs, even though he had never done that in the past. But I was trying to be realistic in myself. He could get into drugs, he could go to girls, he could, he's off at college, at University of Texas, he could go into a lot of things that as a parent I didn't want him to. For him, he sank everything into his studies, and he graduated as a petroleum engineer in 4 years. But he called me one night and woke me up about 11:30. One of those calls, when you get woken up, you're like, what's this? Mom, are you awake? I said, no, honey, but I'm here. What's up? He said, I want to ask you a question. I said, okay. And I'm waking up, trying to sit up in bed, and he said, do you think I've grieved losing Dad? And I said, well, son, I'm not sure that you've had, but you were on such a fast track, and you were working so hard, and I am proud of you that you finished school in 4 years with a very hard major in a very hard time in your life. And I said, but there is time now. And the woman that he's now married to was a psychology major. And she said, I don't think you've grieved losing your dad. And I think you need to do that before we go forward. And he began his journey in some ways. Not that he didn't try to process, but do you understand what I'm saying? It wasn't the time. He wasn't in denial so much, but it wasn't the time. But there can be that denial place because we are just on a fast track in life and trying to figure things out. I called a widow that was someone that lived close to me, and one day, and she had lost her husband in 45 years, and I said, how are you doing? She said, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I'm just too overwhelmed with everything I've got to do. And I said, okay, that's fine. That's fine. And she wasn't ready. And she let me know that. There's the number 2, the anger and frustration, and the blaming and the questioning. We're angry that we've lost our loved one. We're angry that we've lost our financial security. We're angry and mad that we were raped or molested. We're angry. We're frustrated. We blame other people, and we question things. We question things. And I see a lot of that going on right now in the community of Uvalde. Blaming. They want somebody to take some blaming. Even in Kerrville, where we have another home and plan to retire. Right now, with that massive flood that killed a bunch of children at camp and took the lives of, I don't even know what the latest count is now, but it's devastated that community. There's questioning. Even with all this, I'm like, Lord, what are the odds I would be planted in both communities? I even asked my husband, I said, do you know anybody that has a home in Uvalde and Kerrville? Because I don't know of anybody. He said, no, I don't. And I was like, Lord, what are the odds? And you know what the Holy Spirit spoke to me? He said, yeah, but your constant prayer was, I don't want to waste his pain. I was like, Lord, I did pray that. Was this anything I really signed up for? No, but I've embraced it. And I am embracing that call of God on my life. After I spoke in Indonesia at an international women's conference, he got sick. But throughout the years, I've had a heart for Asia and to come back. And Asian women particularly, because that's who I spoke at. And throughout the years, I just say, Lord, if it's ever in your heart, take me back. And the other day, I was sitting on my porch in my quiet time, and all of a sudden, this wave hit me. And as I reflected, I thought, this was not the message I wanted to come back to Asia with. And I started thinking, why am I crying right now? And it dawned on me that August 4th, I remembered, the heart does not forget. Cognitively, I've just been trying to adjust to the food, the culture, the time zone, the beauty of this island. But it would have been our 46th wedding anniversary. And I sobbed. I had to sob and just say, this is not the message I thought I'd get to come back with. But nevertheless, Lord, you're faithful and you've been with me and you hold me by the hand. So many times for me, as someone who's really surrendered my life to the Lord, we can go through hard things. We go through so many blessings. And I would love to tell you of different things, but I come today with this message. Anger, frustration, blaming. And if we don't deal with it, it can keep us stuck. There was one night when I had gotten off the phone 2 hours with a financial advisor trying to figure out, could I pay for the house? What should I do? I had a little bit of life insurance money, but I had medical expenses. My husband was a primary breadwinner, all these things, and he handled that stuff. I had my roles, he had his roles. It was just after 30 years of marriage, it's what we did. I got off the phone and I was, as I put it, spit hopping mad. I was so mad that I was having to deal with it. I was mad he left me. I picked up a plate, I threw it across the room, and all of a sudden it shattered. And I crumbled to the floor and just sobbed. I thought, what on earth is wrong with me? I've never done that in my life. And as I sat there on that floor and sobbed, I just felt and said, God, what is wrong with me? I need help. He said, you're really mad at me because I didn't heal Joe. And you're mad at Joe because he didn't listen to you. Joe was olive complected. He had this beautiful dark skin. And back when we were kids growing up, sunscreen was not ideal. And so, you use baby oil and iodine, if I'm honest. It's just horrible. But anyway, they didn't know what we know now about skin cancer. And this cancer that he got was in the 3rd level of his skin. is deep. And so we didn't even know it until that tumor came through. But I was mad because he was gone and he left me to deal. And at the end of the day, I felt inadequate. I just felt inadequate. I didn't feel like I was smart enough to figure all this out. And the truth is I wasn't, but God was faithful to walk with me and put others around me that helped me figure that out. The third stage of grief is acceptance. We never get over our loss, but you can learn to live with it. You can learn to live with it. And when we come to with the grips that this is our reality, we can embrace that the loss is forever, but we can still treasure those memories. And don't let grief cripple you. So what are feelings and behaviors of someone that is grieving? And this is a picture of my family. This was our last family vacation. Joe had already been diagnosed. Those are my two boys. And this picture was 16 years ago. And my daughter-in-law is on the end. So we now have, everybody's married and we got 11 kids. So our family picture is quite different and different man. And we got a big full life, but it's a different one. But what are some feelings and behaviors? Well, there's sorrow, sadness. You might want to write these down. Anger, guilt. I should have done this. I should have, could have. Guilt, confusion, forgetfulness, and things you can normally handle, you just can't handle. There's also thirst, excessive thirst, and not sleeping well. I'm going to pass out something to you. This has a lot more, and this is something I've come across recently and I used in a grief support group. So I think I've got enough for everyone. Tammy, if you'll come, please help me with that. But this has a lot more. Feelings experienced, physical sensation, thoughts we often experience, and typical behaviors. So you might recognize these in yourself, or you might recognize these in a colleague, a friend, someone at your church, if you go to church. So that's something for you to read at another time. But it can make us feel like we're not making progress when a wave of grief hits us. It can kind of, like it did me the other day, I just wasn't, was going from one thing to the next, going to the wedding, helping my sister, all the things, and all of a sudden that wave hit. And emotionally, I hadn't put it all together. But it's important to process that. And as I woke up on the 4th of August, that day, I wondered, what's this today going to be like? And as I sat there on my porch having the coffee and just reflected on what my life was like 46 years ago, even though I will tell you I'm very happily married to a wonderful man and we have a lot of fun together, but as I reflected back, I just felt like my late husband said, I'm up here celebrating, so go have a great day. So I went and did some retail therapy in Penang and had a good time. Anyway, but I had that processing beforehand. So what are the challenges of grief? What are the challenges? Well, challenges are, number one, grief can be exhausting. It can make you tired. It's exhausting. So be patient with yourself. You are not going to be able to do things as fast as you could, probably, or as quick as you could. Because emotionally, even though you're going through the motions, maybe as a mom, you're cooking dinner, wiping noses, taking kids to school, or as a worker, you're working, you're doing your job, or you're on this fun vacation, should be. Many times though, grief is emotional pain, and it can be exhausting because your heart is somewhere else many times. The second thing I want to bring is people that have not been through grief are not going to understand you probably. And that's sad. And I'm sorry if that's happened to you. But people that haven't been through it are not going to understand you, and they can judge you. You should be over this. They can say stupid things. They can say stupid things. They can judge you. And you know, my favorite prayer became, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And I remember a young girl coming up to me and just making a comment to me. And I had no words for her. But as I looked at her and tried to smile with everything in me, here was my thought, honest to God, young and dumb, young and dumb. That young girl had not been through grief, and she didn't mean to hurt me. She didn't mean to do that. But that woman also went through a number of miscarriages. And because I had forgiven her, it was easy to reach out and say, I'm just so sorry, because I too lost a baby. And, you know, that young girl needed encouragement, and that young mama, and she went through numerous miscarriages. But I'm here to tell you today she's got 2 healthy, beautiful children. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Even strong Christians many times can say hurtful things. Well, it's been a year, you should be over it. Really? Okay. Some griefs take longer, or you shouldn't be handling that. And really, it's out of their own pain, their own disbelief, their own ignorance that they say crazy things. Grief is emotional pain, and just like physical pain, it takes time to heal. The example I'm going to give you is 2 years ago I fell in Italy and I tore my adductor muscle and tendon off of the bone and had to have surgery. And although that's been 2 years ago and they were able to fix it, and my rehab was long and it was hard because I'm a very active person, there's still days that it gets sore. There's still days I have to stretch it. Do you see the analogy in that emotional pain can take a long time to heal? And many people don't know. You wouldn't know that unless I just told you that story. And quite frankly, after being widowed for 2 years, it took me 2 years before I really felt myself again, physically, mentally, emotionally. You don't get over 30 years that quick. But one day I woke up and I was like, I kind of recognize this girl. She was fun-loving, and very active and a go-getter kind of girl. But it took me that long, really. And grief can trigger anxiety. It can trigger anxiety. That's a challenge of grief. It can make us anxious because grief has a way of really bringing us with face-to-face. We're not in charge or in control of anything. We really aren't. And that can trigger anxiety for a lot of people if you don't have something you can trust in. And, when my mom got sick, a dear pastor friend called to check on my mom and dad, and he said, how are you doing? I said, I'm not doing good. Just shot straight with him, and he said, what's going on? I said, why my mom? Why now? My mom, was a children's church minister. Why me? I just stepped into full-time social work and ministry. I need my mom, my cheerleader. And he said, Kathleen, the big question is, can you trust God if you never get the answer to the why question? Can you trust God? And I wasn't going to lie to him. I said, I don't know. I'm going to have to get back with you. Because I wasn't going to give him a Christianese message in life. And it took me a while. But for me, I was like, what else do I have to trust in? What else do I have to lean on? If we concentrate on the why question, it will keep you stuck. And the anxiety, I had a dear friend that called me, and she called me and she said, Kathleen, can you talk? I said, yes. She said, you know me? I said, yeah, I think I do. She said, do you think I'm an anxious person? I said, no. She said, all of a sudden I'm anxious and I don't know what's wrong with me. Will you pray for me? I said, yeah, I'd be happy to. And as we chatted for a minute and I kind of heard what was going on, she said, it dawned on me that she had lost her mom recently. And I just said, the anxiety you're dealing with is because you've come face to face that we're really not in charge or in control of anything. And it made her feel better. She took a real sigh and we prayed and ran into her not too long after that, and she was at a much better place. Another challenge of grief is an inability to concentrate. It's an inability to concentrate on something. Emotionally, you're somewhere else. You may be sitting there nodding, you may be at your computer and you're doing your work, but emotionally you're thinking, your heart's somewhere else. And grief can be very lonely. Oh my word, I am not going to lie to you. Grief is so lonely at times because people don't understand us. They don't know what to do with us. And let me just encourage you to mourn with hope. Hope anchors our soul when the waves are washing over us. Hope in God. And mourning will either take you, if you mourn with hope, it can take you to the Comforter. I found in the Bible a lot was said about God comforting us. Isaiah 61, 1-3. It says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the meek. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to captives and open the prison for those that are bound, to give us beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and remove that spirit of heaviness. Luke 4:18-19 also tells us that those were things I clung to for my very next breath at times. Psalms 6, 6 and 7 is another passage. It says, I'm worn out from groaning, and all night long I flood my bed with weeping and drench my couch with tears. And there are many other scriptures. I actually have a chapter in the book on just passages, a bunch of the different ones that became things I clung to in my pain and devastation. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to stand up, grab some water, breathe, and then we're going to go forward. And we're going to talk about some ways to say goodbye. And we're also going to talk about the important things and how we can thrive. So just stretch your legs, move a little bit. I can lead you in calisthenics if we need to. Okay, so what are some ways that we can say goodbye? Because your loss deserves a goodbye. Whether it's the loss of a loved one, whether it's the loss of or death of the dream you had, whether it's the loss of a business or your financial security or your virginity or whatever, your loss deserves a goodbye. And many times those goodbyes, there can be many of them. There can be many of them. There's not just one, okay, I took one afternoon and said goodbye and that's it. Sometimes it can be that way. When I lost my grandfather, for me, you know, I had had him a long time. I knew he was getting old and sick. Cognitively, I knew he'd be gone. You know, but for me, I didn't get to see him. I was a young mom. I had I had one child at that time, but I was busy. And I needed to process that. So one day I sat down and wrote him a letter and said everything I needed to say or wanted to say to him that I either didn't or just who he was in my life at that time. So your loss and saying goodbye can bring peace to your heart, and your heart can begin to heal. So we must say goodbye to the person or season in order to move forward. And many times those losses can be multiple. I had a woman that lost a child as a small child, but she came up to me after a seminar and she said, she would still think about, because she saw all her little girl's friends graduating, and hers was not. Even though it had been years. There was also the mother who came up to me who had a child with spina bifida. And she came up and she said, my child is this age and she should be doing X, Y, and Z, graduating. I don't remember exactly what she said. She said, but mine is not. And there was a woman that said, all my child's friends are going off to college, they're getting married, they're doing that. Do you see the death of the dreams that mama had for that child? And embracing the pain does not sound fun, but it is how we grow and how we heal. And so crying and pouring out our heart is important. Embracing the pain many times doesn't sound fun, but it's so important. So crying, and for me, pouring out my heart to the Lord, pouring out my heart to someone I can trust with my heart is important. But many times, it's in those quiet times. Or, again, writing a letter in my grief. I actually had a grief journal that I started. I'm a journaler. And I journal a good bit in the morning in my quiet time. And when I was going through grief, I started journaling a little bit about the where my heart was. And I was like, I don't know that I want to mix these two together. And so I got a grief journal. And I happened to come across that not too long ago. I was looking for something and found it. And I picked it up and looked at it, and I was like, oh my. And my thought was, I don't have time to deal with this right now, but I really do want to burn it because I don't really want my children to find it when I'm gone from this earth, because it really was the agony my heart was in. Okay? And that's how real it is, but it was in a journal, a lot of it. Writing a letter, saying goodbye, it's important. Maybe it's crying. I remember when my son graduated from college and I was driving alone to that event, and that wave just hit. His dad should be here. We should be sharing this special moment. And they're not. But I poured out my heart as I was driving and had to redo my makeup when I got there. But anyway. And forgiveness is something that is an important part in a way we can say goodbye. And you might be saying, what are you talking about, Kathleen? Well, forgiveness is something you do for yourself. Write that down. I've had so many people that don't want to forgive because they feel like they're letting their offender off the hook. And that's not true. That's really not what it says in the Bible. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself. And for me, like I shared, forgiving God that He didn't heal my husband. I asked Him, Lord, please forgive me because, I just am frustrated in this situation. It's okay to pour your heart out to it. You're not going to say anything that is going to shock Him. He already knows everything about you and loves you anyway. He just does. But forgiveness is an important part, I think, of many times saying goodbye. I see many people that run from the reality of saying goodbye. They feel like it's a betrayal in some way, and that's not true. It's how we embrace and treasure the memories that we carry in our heart, and it's how we can move forward. So my words to you are honor the pain, but don't live in it. Honor the pain, but don't live in it. And one of my favorite prayers is, Lord, this still hurts. Heal my heart. God, this still hurts. Heal my heart. I've been through a lot of healing, but there's still those times when my heart is pricked. And another important way to move forward is to make a list, and write this down, please. Make a list of what you miss about the person or the season of your life. What do you wish that you could be doing with them now? Make a list of what you miss about them. Admit how you feel. And then I found that passage where it says that Jesus is familiar with our suffering. He's familiar with our pain. And He came to carry our sorrows. There's that place of handing Him what is making your heart sad today. And there is that place of handing it and say, Lord, will you carry this for me? But acknowledge how you feel. Don't stuff your pain. Don't medicate it. Don't feed it. Tell God your shattered dream and ask Him to carry it. So, okay, I already said that. Okay, so what are some important things to know about grief? Well, it's a process and can't be rushed. It's a process. The next bullet point is honor the pain, but don't live in it. I think there's way too many people that idolize the grave, even some cultures that idolize the grave. Honor the pain, but ask God to keep you moving through it. And the greater the love or the relationship, the longer that grief can take. The greater the love, the greater the involvement. Becoming a widow, there was a whole lot of grief to work through because we had a 33-year history and a lot of life. Times when I do reflect, and every once in a while all my grandkids can be running around, commotion, everybody's talking. It's a goat rodeo, let me just say there. It's so much fun. And all these conversations going on, and Stephen my husband now, is the only grandfather my grandkids know. But there are those times I step back and just think, oh, Joe, you would be loving this. This is so much fun. It's so crazy. I got a headache from all the noise, but it's good. But I miss that we aren't sharing that together. Even though I treasure and I'm so grateful for my husband now, and my boys have their own private chat with him, on text, and they bet on a golf game or a match, or they do stuff together all the time. And so Stephen has been a great asset in that way, but there's still those times. I miss what I had. All right, so another important thing is to keep moving through it. Ask God to help you not get stuck. And our feelings can lie to us. So again, like I said, God is a God of truth. Scripture tells us that over and over. And so I encourage you to pray, Lord, reveal truth anywhere I'm believing a lie. I feel like my life is over. As a young widow, there were days I would lay in bed and I felt like my life was over. Now, cognitively, I had 3 children that needed their mom. Cognitively, I knew I had a lot to live for. But the core of what I felt was I felt like my life was over. And I went through just a period of depression. And I'm not ashamed to say, for a year and a half, I was on an antidepressant. I had a friend that was a doctor that said, "Do you think you could be depressed?" I said, "Oh, I'm the glass is half full girl. I think I'm all right." But I had the TV on one night. I was working on my computer, and this commercial came on. "Are you tired all the time? Do you sleep? Do you da-da-da-da-da?" And I'm sitting there nodding as I'm typing, If so, you could be struggling with depression. And I literally just kind of laughed because I thought, busted. I called that doctor and I said, she said, I was noticing. She said, she was my mom's neurologist and mine because I had a shoulder issue and was getting shot. She said, "I noticed." And she said, "The serotonin in your brain is gone." And she said, "We need to get it built back up." And so for a year and a half, so I'm not afraid to tell people, go get help. Go get help. I work with a lot of people in my work now, and I'm quick to refer them to, if I see those signs and symptoms, if we work through some things and I see them getting stuck. Sometimes you do need medical professionals, and you do need licensed counselors, and you do need trauma therapy. I'm quick to refer people when I realize that, because I know what I'm called to do, and I know people that can help them. And so those are important things, but our feelings can lie to you. Do you see the analogy? My feelings, I feel like my life is over. I feel like this will never go away. But I had to acknowledge that. And you can do that. Write it down. Process with it. Grief is a time of transition. Many times grief hijacks us and life isn't the same as it was before. But just as a butterfly, that caterpillar's crawling along, has its plan, and then all of a sudden it's in that dark cocoon and it's hanging upside down. Now that's what grief felt like to me. But then the beauty is that cocoon can, for some people, they don't deal with their stuff, and so they can stay stuck in that cocoon. But I believe that there are beauty in the ashes. And grief is a time of transition, and just as that little caterpillar that butterfly begins to come out of that cocoon, it has to wrestle to get out. Transition and childbirth, not my best friends. Had 3 children natural, and not because I wanted to, But because that's just the way it happened. And I know in that time of transition, when it was right before I gave birth, I looked at my husband, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. Take me home. I don't. And I was serious as a heart attack. And he looked at me and was like, I'm not taking you home, that's for sure, until you have this baby. But I was in transition. And I did not know with my first child what on earth was going on. I just knew it hurt and it was hard. But it was right before I gave birth. And that doctor looked at me, he said, Kathleen, come on, don't stick with me. One more push and you're gonna have that baby, that redheaded baby. I sat up on that table, looked at my husband who was olive complected and dark headed, and I said, I promise it's yours. I mean, that was the only thing, because I could not figure out how I was having a redheaded baby. But we had some recessive genes on both sides of the family that we had not factored in. So anyway, another important thing about your grief is you and not others are responsible for your healing. You can't look to other people to heal your pain or your heart. I could not look to my children to heal my pain. They lost their dad. I couldn't pour everything into them. They were dealing with enough. I've seen many widows get mad and angry because their children don't do X, Y, and Z, not realizing their own kids are going through grief. And anniversaries can trigger grief, either consciously or subconsciously. Maybe you quit sleeping well. Maybe you're more emotional. Maybe, like me, I tend to deal with more anticipatory grief. The actual day of our anniversary, I did not cry, but I shared with you how that hit me. Oh yeah, 46 years ago, this was what my life looked like. And let me encourage you to put off making major decisions right after you go through a grief. Many people just think I want to just change everything, and they're really just trying to forget everything. But that grief will catch up with you. I encourage widows, don't change your residence, don't change your job, don't change. Give yourself some time to heal, and you're going to make a better, more rational decision. And the other important thing is take the pain to Jesus, tell him what you miss, and ask him to carry your grief. Acknowledge it, don't run from it. So, grief in the holidays, I've already touched on some anniversaries, maybe the anniversary of the death, maybe it's the anniversary of that person's birthday can trigger grief, maybe it's the anniversary of your wedding anniversary, whatever it is, the death of a friend, maybe an important holiday, maybe your mom, your dad is gone, and those first holidays without my parents, and being around, those were hard. Those were hard because my parents had been around for all of my life until that point. And so we had to do some things differently. Holidays and birthdays can be difficult because there's so many memories tied to them. There's so many memories. This is a picture of our family the last Christmas, right before Joe was diagnosed, January the 8th. But holidays can be more challenging in some ways because we just don't feel like celebrating. We're exhausted. You can't go at the normal pace. You feel vulnerable. And I know my kids did not want to be home the first Christmas without their dad. And I was like, what about all our traditions? What about all our things? I was at home. I had a lot of time to process my grief alone in my house. But my kids, for them at that point, coming home was painful because they were all young adults. They were busy in their careers. They were trying to do their life. But when they came home, there was that, oh yeah, Dad's not here reminder. So we had to do things different that Christmas, and we did. We went on a trip. And we did that for, I don't know, a year or two, and then, we do things now similar to what we used to do. But honor your loved one. Honor them. If it's Easter is your big deal, if it's Thanksgiving, whatever's your holiday, honor them in some way. The first year we all went around the table and said what we were thankful about and what we missed. It was a little hard, but it was our way of honoring our loved one. Now we do things different. There's still a Christmas ornament that hangs on my Christmas tree that I bought the year that I lost the baby that I lost. And I bought a little pink ornament to honor her life, even though I never got to hold her. But there is that just, I think, I stop and think, I do the math, and just think how long it's been. But there's still an ornament that hangs on our tree. And give yourself permission to cry on that. Maybe your life feels, it's different, but that anniversary that you and your husband would have had, but now you're divorced, or maybe a special time you had with your friend, and now that friend is not here because of a disagreement or a death or something. But holidays can be challenging. And so what are the keys to thriving through grief? Well, I think one of the keys, and we talked about how thrive means to grow and to develop vigorously. Keep letting go a little, either daily, weekly, or each month. What do I need to let go of? Think about it. Think about it. And let the tears roll. Don't hold them in. That's a big key. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with yourself. And even tell yourself, there were days I would say, this is only a season. This isn't my life. I'm not going to cry forever. I remember the first day I didn't cry after losing my husband. The first day I didn't cry after losing my mom and my dad. Because our heart can feel and it can hurt so badly. But be patient with yourself. Yeah, come on in. Tell them they can come in. And ask God to reveal truth to you. We've already talked about that. But keep a notebook of key information, because when you're going through a heavy grief, maybe you lost a friend to suicide, maybe you lost your mom, you lost your brother, you lost your sister. Keep a notebook, because you're going to be forgetful. I put everything in a yellow spiral notebook. Now, I didn't always have that spiral notebook with me, but I might write it on a sticky, and then I would put that sticky in my yellow notebook. It was very helpful for me to keep everything in one place. And balance is a big key in our grief. Balance is key. Balance in, I had to handle death certificates. I had to pay bills. I had to still clean the house. I had a job I could have spent 12 hours a day doing, working with disadvantaged women and in social work. But none of those were healthy for me to do for hours. What was healthy is keeping a balance. And I had to learn to have fun again, too. It was important to have fun. It's okay to have fun and in your grief. It's okay. I give you permission to find joy and do something for yourself. We're going to talk about self-care a little bit. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But self-care And balance is a big key in life. And take one day at a time. This is an important key, to take one day at a time. For me to look back at all that I had lost, losing my mom, my dad, my husband, was overwhelming. To look too far in the future of what life would be without them was overwhelming. But to just look at, what do I need to do today? I would walk into my office and I'd look at my assistant, say, I don't know if I'm going to be here 5 minutes or 5 hours. So whatever's most important, can you put it on my desk? I was being gut level honest. Take one day at a time. And you know what? The truth was, I ended up staying usually longer than I thought I could. It just took that step of getting up, getting out. And ask God to show you things from His perspective. How does He see your life? And you got to be willing to step out of your comfort zone, make new memories, try new things. And a real important thing is hang on to hope in the dark days. Hang on to hope. Ask hope to anchor your soul. And for me, I'd say this is only a season. This is only a season. And the secret weapon that I found, I remember one day asking God, I said, Lord, my perspective of my life isn't good. But Lord, how do you see my life? And the Lord said, I have a lot of adventure ahead for you, Kathleen. And I wrote that down. I thought, okay, that sounds good. You know, and Indiana Jones, if you watch any of those old movies, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark and all of those, you know, he would encounter an adversity and then he would, you know, it looked like it was over, but then he would come through, you know. But it helped me to look forward in life with, when God said, it's an adventure, you're on an adventure with me. Anything that looks daunting or looks a little fearful to me, I just am like, okay, Lord, I'm on an adventure with you. And initiate connection with other people. Grief can be so isolating. We can sit around and feel sorry for ourselves, but initiate doing things with other people. I have sat with many widows that complain because they don't do anything anymore. They sit in their homes. And one of my questions is, why don't you call someone? And why don't you initiate? I had to learn to do that, was initiate connection with people. So what are the benefits of grief? We're almost through. The benefits are, it can teach us a lot about yourself. It can teach you a lot about yourself. I learned a lot about who I was standing on my own 2 feet as Kathleen Maxwell. I learned who I was without my parents. I learned who I was without my husband. I learned a lot about myself. I developed a compassion, a deeper compassion. And a benefit is the grief your heart is dealing with now can develop a compassion in you. And I got rid of fear, some of the fears that I had when I embraced my grief head on. I have numerous podcasts on freedom from fear because that's a big part of my story. This is my husband now, and this is a picture of us in Italy. So that is a benefit. You know, I learned and found how to have another life, how to love again. And you know, that was interesting because when I realized I was falling in love with Stephen, all of a sudden I backed up and he called me on it. He said, what's going on with us? He had told me he loved me. He had told me he'd want to get married. He wanted to get married. And I was like, oh, cowboy, he's a cowboy. You'll see a picture in a minute. And I was like, oh, cowboy, slow down, slow down. I'm just trying to figure things out. And, but when I was honest with myself and found myself falling in love with him, I kind of backed up. And he said, what's going on? I need you to talk to me. What's going on? And I said, I think I'm falling in love with you, but the last time I loved, I lost. And I'm wrestling with that because I would be facing that I could lose again. I mean, I was being real. And he said, okay, well, as long as I know I didn't do anything wrong and all. And I had to wrestle with that question. But I had seen God's faithfulness and I knew I could trust him, even if I go through that again. Okay, so, you can grow in confidence in a lot of ways through your grief when you walk with God. And like I said, I dealt with a lot of fears and a lot of those awful things I had to face in my grief. I remember the first time I was going on a date, and all of a sudden I kind of panicked, and I was like, what on earth? I did oh my word, the last time I dated, life was like this. She went steady, I mean, my goodness. Anyway, things had changed a lot since my teenage years and in my 50s. And, but as I stood there in my foyer, one of the things that hit me was, is this as bad? Okay, Lord, I give you my heart, protect my mind, protect my heart, protect my body, protect it all. And then I stepped back and I said, is this as bad as watching tumors grow on someone I love? I went through hell. I can do this. God's been faithful to me. And I took that step of faith. And anyway, it can help you grow in confidence. And you're stronger than you think you are. Okay, so what helps him? What does not? Let's talk about that, because that's a big thing. So here's the thing that's important. And let me just preface this. I was talking to my 17-year-old nephew, and he was a little toddler when I went through all of this. And he came to, it was spur of the moment, but ended up doing this seminar on Sunday for a group of people. And he happened to come, because he could come. And I said, what's your favorite part? He said, oh my gosh, Aunt Kathleen, I never knew all that about you. I never knew that part, I never knew this and that. So I was really curious to see what a 17-year-old thought. And he said, my friend and I, we've been talking about it, and he's just going on and on. And he said, my favorite part was the part about what to say and what not to say. And I thought that was interesting to him. I mean, interesting to me that's what, was a big topic of discussion. So people going through grief, let them talk. Be a good listener. That's so important. Look them in the eye. Be a good listener. Be a good listener. They don't need any answers. Many times they just need someone to be with them because their heart's in pain. I'm not a heart doctor. There are a lot of things I can't fix, but I can just be a friend and sit, even with people I don't know, and listen. Be a good listener. And don't say things like, I know exactly how you feel. I'm not going to tell you that because I don't know. Your story is different than mine. Your loss is different. You're here for one reason. And only you know that. I had people say some of the craziest things. Well, you're young. You'll find another husband. I didn't want another one. I missed the one I lost. Or after losing the baby, well, you can have another baby. Or, well, you've already got 3 kids. Isn't that enough? No, I lost a life. My heart as a mom, I had already bonded with that baby. I'd already wrapped my head around, I'm going to be 38 and I'm going to have a new sidekick. And okay, here we go. And then that dream was dashed. Offer specific things for people grieving. Many people said, let me know if you need anything. And that's a good thing to say, but offer something specific. I had someone offer to do my yard. They gave me 3 months. I'm going to send my yard man. You would have thought they gave me $1 million. I'm going to chop wood for you. I'm going to stack it on your porch. Why don't you go with us? We're going to go to watch or look at the Christmas lights on the San Antonio River. Things like that were specific gifts to me. Honor, if you know someone close, honor the anniversary. Widows that I'm close to and that are my friends, not just people I frequently try to tag that in my phone to get a reminder when their anniversary is, the anniversary of the loss of their husband, or the anniversary of the loss of the child, or the birthday. Those things let the people know that you care, that their heart might be hurting. Let them cry. Let people cry. Let them express their pain. You don't have to fix it. Just be with them. In the book, there are many promises that God has for us in our grief and devastation. But be careful with your words. And if you don't really know what to say, you know what? A lot of people in Kerrville that just lost property, that just lost family members, that just lost a lot of things. You know what I said? I have no words. I have no words. It acknowledges their loss. But I have no words at that point. This picture, and I'm grateful for these people. These were friends of my late husband and mine. We did life together. That's Tammy on the end and her husband Alan. And they're dear friends that I led life with Joe, my late husband. But they were also people I made Stephen go out with before I'd go out with him by myself. And so there we are. We get together every Texas Independence Day, rent a house. We go to this party, we dance, we have fun. And we all look forward to it because we're all in different directions in different towns now. But it's that one time that we do get together. So I'm grateful for them. They were there for me in those dark days of grief. All right, so we've wrapped things up. I'm going to ask if, I think I might have enough books, but if you're a couple, if you'll just take one, and I'm happy I've signed some of them, but I can put your name on it if you want. And we're going to wrap things up, and but let me pray before I dismiss you. So, Father, I just come to you right now, and I thank you for your love, for your peace, for your kindness, and your goodness. I thank you that the Comforter walks with us, and that you never leave us or forsake us. I thank you, Jesus, that you're a God that binds up the brokenhearted, and you'll carry our pain. So I pray each listener would run to you when that wave hits. And that grief would have a good work, and that you would keep each one listening, whether by podcast or in person. Keep them moving through the valley and show them what to let go of as they look at their devastation. In Jesus' name, amen.